WhatCulture Pro Wrestling, aka WCPW, aka Defiant Wrestling, was a wrestling promotion formed in 2016 by the WhatCulture Wrestling YouTube channel. And despite a super hot start with names like Cody Rhodes, Kurt Angle, Rey Mysterio, The GOAT Angelico, and others, but WhatCulture Pro Wrestling would shut its doors in 2019 after numerous incidents that led to that point. So how did this happen? What were the key incidents that led to the death of WhatCulture Pro Wrestling? Like the video and let's talk about it. One of the things that WCPW had to deal with fairly early on in their run as a company in 2017, only about a year into running WCPW, was their various issues with demonetization regarding their weekly show WCPW Loaded. WCPW Loaded was WCPW's weekly show that aired for free every week on YouTube. It's very uncommon for an indie product to have a weekly show, no less one that airs weekly for free on the internet, but regardless, WCPW were delivering that, and no doubt that definitely cost a lot of their budget. But I guess the ad revenue was at least good enough to be able to support it week to week, but that would be until 2017, in the midst of the YouTube adpocalypse. WCPW would face issues with their business model of airing a free weekly show. By the way, sidebar, if you don't know what the YouTube adpocalypse is, it's basically in mid-2017 when a whole bunch of YouTube advertisers all at the same time pulled out their ads at once, and YouTube started being a lot more strict with what kind of content would be monetized, and there was many issues with that, with certain genres of content on the site being wrongfully demonetized and deemed not advertiser suitable, with wrestling largely being one of those. As WhatCulture Pro Wrestling on May 22nd, 2017 put out a video explaining that they had to cancel their upcoming Loaded tapings due to these issues.
Over the last few months, there's been a crucial change to YouTube's programming and guidelines, which has seen it classify certain videos as non-advertiser friendly content, and wrestling videos fall under that umbrella. Wrestling as a whole is inappropriate. See, how YouTube channels like us make most of our money is from ad revenue, the ads you see before and during videos. And you'll have seen a lot of wrestling YouTubers talk about how this fundamental change to YouTube is seriously jeopardizing their ability to make a living from their content. The ad revenue on the WhatCulture Wrestling channel has been reduced by over a third for the majority of our videos. That's bad. But for WCPW, which depicts full, living, breathing wrestling, it's been absolutely destroyed. To give you an idea of how drastically the WCPW YouTube channel has been affected, we uploaded a video, Alberto El Patron versus Rey Mysterio from the Mexican qualifier of the World Cup. That video has been seen 1 million times. The ad revenue we've received from that, so far, $43. Ad revenue is crucial for WCPW, and it's sad to say that without that money, a weekly free YouTube show is now unsustainable.
In response, WCPW would hold WhatCulture Pro Wrestling Fight Back, a pay-per-view that would air for free on YouTube with the message of showing people that wrestling brings people together and shouldn't be deemed as advertiser unfriendly, with the show featuring matches like Kaylee Ray versus Viper, Joe Hendry versus Martin Kirby, and a speech from Adam Blompier on behalf of wrestling fans to YouTube. And ironically enough, this video was demonetized and WhatCulture Pro Wrestling were given a strike. Loaded as a weekly show would remain as an on and off thing for the rest of WCPW and Defiant Wrestling's history, as it would have multiple hiatuses and multiple returns as a weekly show. Eventually the YouTube adpocalypse did sort itself out and wrestling content is all fine again, but like I said, following this incident, Loaded as a weekly show was never the same again really, and it definitely made WhatCulture Pro Wrestling look at their business model and have to switch it up a bit. The next incident that caused WCPW to die and fade away wasn't necessarily an issue with WCPW itself, but rather something that was going down with the WhatCulture Wrestling YouTube channel. WCPW was of course the brainchild of the WhatCulture Wrestling YouTube channel, which was a YouTube channel that had been making wrestling content for years and had gotten big with names like Adam Blompier, Adam Patiti, Jack, Sam, Ross, and others on the channel, who would help build up WhatCulture Wrestling's popularity to a point where they were even able to start a wrestling promotion to begin with. And of course, all these guys had heavy involvement in WCPW. Some of them did commentary, some of them did ring announcing, or were general managers, or were valets for wrestlers and on-screen characters. Obviously, this was a very divisive thing, using these guys as characters on screen, but at the start, WCPW was a total YouTube wrestling crossover show, and it definitely had mass appeal to WhatCulture Wrestling fans, as they got to watch wrestling with big stars, whilst their favorite WhatCulture Wrestling personalities would appear on the show in their own way. And so when out of nowhere it was announced that all those WhatCulture Wrestling personalities that I just named were leaving all at once, it definitely alienated a large portion of the WhatCulture Wrestling fan base. As it was announced on September 19th, 2017 that WhatCulture Wrestling personalities Adam Blompier, Adam Pacitti, Jack the Jobber, Sam Driver, and King Ross would all be leaving the channel simultaneously. They all left WhatCulture Wrestling to form Cultaholic, with that channel launching that same year, with everyone but Adam Blompier involved in it. He was meant to be involved, but of course fell into controversy. But like I said, the main WhatCulture Wrestling personalities leaving the channel left many WhatCulture Wrestling fans alienated, and it definitely caused many WhatCulture Wrestling fans to check out of WhatCulture Wrestling, and as a result, it meant they checked out of the WhatCulture Wrestling universe as a whole, meaning WCPW was also being checked out of. I say this as an example because as a big WhatCulture Wrestling fan growing up as a kid, this is definitely something that happened with me. When the main WhatCulture Wrestling personalities left the channel, it left me disinterested in the entirety of the WhatCulture Wrestling universe, WCPW included. But this wasn't the only thing that would help to alienate WhatCulture Wrestling and WhatCulture Pro Wrestling viewers, as there was an announcement just 11 days later that combined with this to properly just kill WCPW. And I mean literally kill WCPW, as 11 days after the announcement of all the departures, WhatCulture Pro Wrestling announced that they would be renaming to On September 30th, 2017, the WCPW YouTube channel posted the following.
From December 4th, WCPW is relaunching.
From December 4th, we are Defiant Wrestling.
A promotion that will help showcase Britain as pro wrestling's hottest territory.
A promotion that will help put the very best talent
in front of the world's greatest fans.
We can do this because we have the support, we have the skills, we have the belief and passion.
And we have the general manager. We are Defiant.
WCPW officially announced themselves to be rebranding as Defiant Wrestling. And you might be thinking it's a bit over dramatic to be saying that a name change would kill a company. Defiant Wrestling isn't a bad name change, and to get the WhatCulture name out of your wrestling company is actually a pretty good idea to keep it as its own entity. However, the issue is that WhatCulture Pro Wrestling was truly dead and killed off because WCPW and Defiant Wrestling, the products they presented, were two entirely different things, and so when WCPW rebranded to Defiant Wrestling, it was a totally different product with a totally different roster and business model. WCPW were a company that used to bring in big names: Kurt Angle, Rey Mysterio, the Bullet Club, the Young Bucks, Cody Rhodes, and they were constantly bringing in big talent from the American independent scene and former WWE talent, and it was a big way that they were able to build up their name very early on, and helps them draw great viewership and build up their fan base to a big degree very early, like I said. Defiant Wrestling, however, was not like this whatsoever. Defiant Wrestling became exclusively a British wrestling promotion, with international stars being far and few between. Now, there's no problem with them being a British wrestling promotion if that's how they want to run. The issue is how they presented themselves at the start with WCPW, with all the star power that clearly wasn't sustainable and wasn't going to last forever, and fans who expected to see that weren't going to see it anymore, and so even more of the WCPW/Defiant fan base had just been alienated, as Defiant Wrestling was a completely different product to WhatCulture Pro Wrestling. It's no disrespect to the stars and the roster they were bringing in, but it was a far cry from the days of doing World Cup tournaments with international wrestlers from all over the world and big names like Kurt Angle and Cody Rhodes and Rey Mysterio. Those days were now long gone, and Defiant Wrestling would definitely feel that, with a big drop in viewership, and the viewership would just continue to drop over the years as Defiant Wrestling continued on, on as an exclusively British wrestling promotion. But unfortunately for Defiant Wrestling, it turns out they were going to face their own difficulties as a BritRes promotion as well because of the formation of In 2016, WWE held their United Kingdom Championship tournament, a tournament with stars of the British wrestling scene across 2 nights, being won by Tyler Bate, with the network special being seen as a big success, and a new WWE UK weekly show was apparently in the works for the WWE network. Another UK Championship tournament was held the next year before in 2018, the NXT UK brand was officially formed, with WWE's UK weekly TV show plans finally coming into fruition as NXT UK began taping their weekly show in July 2018, with NXT UK being its own standalone brand with its own belts and its own roster. And I think you can probably see where I'm about to go with this. Despite the guarantees that NXT UK and WWE UK talent would be able to work the UK independent scenes freely, that just wasn't the case and wasn't true at all, and as a result, Defiant Wrestling would lose a lot of their British wrestling talent, a lot of talent who were there since the WCPW days. WCPW stars like Joseph Connors, Viper, Kaylee Ray, and other BritRes talent who were in Defiant Wrestling would start appearing less and less before eventually just stopping appearing at all, with WCPW left with a limited talent pool. And obviously this wasn't an issue that just Defiant Wrestling faced, this was an issue that the entire UK independent scene faced, and the arrival of NXT UK definitely hurt the scene as a whole, as Defiant Wrestling were definitely one of the biggest damage takers, changing to a British wrestling promotion just for NXT UK to form the very next year is tough. Ouch. And yeah, of course, in 2019, Defiant Wrestling would officially close its doors. The news of the closure was very sad to many, as many had many memories with WCPW, and hey, even some with Defiant Wrestling as well. But by the time of the last Defiant show they ever held, the promotion was a shell of itself in terms of quality and popularity. While it was sad that the promotion went bust, it really wasn't a surprise, and they had been inactive for months before that point. WCPW/Defiant Wrestling ultimately died because the WCPW business model, while it attracted big stars and attracted big viewership, it just wasn't sustainable in the slightest. Flying in international talents, holding big World Cup tournaments, doing a free weekly show just wasn't sustainable at all, but they found themselves in a corner because if they changed that model, they'll be changing their company completely, and they found that out with Defiant Wrestling as the promotion's popularity dwindled for years after the change. Regardless, I'm glad that WCPW existed. I have great memories watching WCPW as a kid. It was a great promotion, and whilst I wasn't the biggest fan of Defiant Wrestling, it was a shame that it wasn't able to stick around and did meet its demise. But guys, that's it from me on this video about WhatCulture Pro Wrestling or Defiant Wrestling and all the incidents that led to the death of the company. Comment down below your thoughts on WCPW, and if you watched WCPW back in the day and what you thought of it. Are you a fan of it? Do you have any memories of it? Leave it down below, and leave a like on this video if you did enjoy, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss a video. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye, and keep on rolling.